Thanks everyone so much for joining on from the live stream. If you're watching on YouTube, we really appreciate you being here today. My name is John Ambrose. I'm the corporate relations specialist here at the Huntsman School, and I work directly with Goldman Sachs. We're super excited to have them here with us today. We've got three guests with us. We have Richelle, we've got Courtney, we've got, remind me again how to pronounce it. Colin, Kate, the Y is coming off. Kylan, gosh dang it. We went over this beforehand and I still can't get it right. Kylan, you can fire me. It's fine.
You're doing a great job.
I'm gonna kick us off first off by introducing Richelle. Richelle and I have worked together for a little bit here, but a little formal background. Richelle is the vice president of university relations at Goldman Sachs. Richelle joined Goldman as a summer analyst in Chicago in the operations division back in 2006. And then she joined full-time the following year. During her 13-year tenure with the firm, Richelle located to Salt Lake City to help grow operations presence in the Mountain West. She also was able to experience mobility at many forms of the firm, and she's been heavily involved in Goldman Sachs affinity networks. Prior to her current role, she worked as part of a strategy and management team and spent over 9 years in operations and divisions supporting various products and processes. Richelle earned a Bachelor's of Arts back at Indiana University in Spanish and psychology. As a fellow Hoosier, it's always fun to connect with someone in that regard. So Richelle, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch over to you so you can introduce the rest of Goldman.
Great. Thanks so much, John. And thanks for inviting us to do this. We're really excited to be able to share our insights with you. And we have two 2019 grads, Utah State Huntsman alumni with us today to help share a little bit of that story. So I guess I'll hand it over to Courtney first. Courtney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated, like Richelle said, in 2019 in management information systems and a minor in human resources. And I interned with Goldman in 2018 on our change management team. And then I joined them full-time back in July of 2019 on the change management team as well, doing project management.
And Courtney, the overall division that you're in through your change management role, your project management role, it's in the
Global Markets Operations.
Global Markets Operations Division. Thank you. Yep. And Kylan, how about you? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I graduated in December of 2019, so pretty recently, in double majored in finance and economics. And I also interned last summer in the same division that I'm working on, same team. I'm in the CIMD division on the Ames private equity team.
And Kylan, for those who are less familiar with our acronyms at Goldman Sachs, what does
Yes.
CIMD stand for?
Richelle, yes. So CIMD is the Consumer and Investment Management Division.
Great. And Ames, another acronym, right? Can you explain a little bit more about what you do in Ames?
Yeah. So Ames is the alternative investment and manager selection business. And we basically just diligence external managers to Goldman Sachs and create portfolios of investments for them, for our clients.
All right, thank you. Okay, so Kylan, let's go with you. You both recently went through this process. I think about 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Goldman Sachs decided to adjust our interview process. And in that interview process, we decided to use an electronic recorded interview platform called HireVue. It's personally exciting to us, I think, because it's a Utah-based company, but it has really allowed us to democratize our process, meaning, historically we would take a handful of people to a college campus and host a very limited number of first-round interviews. Very limiting for us. And I think we can all agree that really sharp, really talented students exist everywhere, right? And so by using HireVue, we've really been able to see literally thousands more students than we otherwise would have been able to see. Now, that being said, the concept of being recorded and having to represent yourself and having to tell your story while being filmed and also not having a human on the other side, it can be a little bit intimidating or anxiety inducing. I think there's a small subset of people who probably have YouTube channels of their own who just knock it out of the park on being filmed. But for the rest of us, there's some nerves involved there, right? So Kylan, can you talk a little bit about, once you received that email in your inbox, congratulations, we've invited you to our first round interview process via HireVue. How did you think about preparing?
Yeah, absolutely. It was my first experience, doing an online interview as well. So I definitely felt those nerves that you spoke about. But my experience in preparing, I would just say I just practiced a lot. Sent my resume to several professors, had them review it. I had several phone calls with professors and mentors, and actually some Goldman Sachs alum that I knew who worked here. I just phone called them to, talk about questions that they may have been asked or practice saying my answers. Because I would say the biggest thing about HireVue is that you just don't have enough time to think about a story when you get asked the question. I mean, it's immediate. You have to know your answers. You have to know your story before the question's asked. So it's just about being prepared, anticipating the right questions and knowing yourself and being confident in who you are.
So I heard a couple of things that you said there. Practice was one, and I get really excited that you said that because we can tell if someone has practiced, right? You can tell if someone is familiar and knows their story and knows how to frame it in the context of different questions that an employer might ask. But you also mentioned the importance of networking and building your network, right? Getting that advice. And then also getting feedback, not only on your resume, which is really important, but also getting feedback on some of those practice mock interviews that you were doing. So some really good advice. And obviously it worked out for you. So hopefully those who are listening kind of take that to heart. Courtney, what about you? What are some of the things that you did in order to help prepare you and get you to the point where you were ready to push play on the Goldman Sachs HireVue?
Yeah, so I worked with Marin. She was one of the career coaches at the time. I'm not sure if she still is, but I know that the Huntsman School always has really excellent career coaches. At the time, she was able to provide me with a link that the Huntsman School had for practice HireVues. So it's completely like you just record yourself and then you can watch yourself back and then it will delete and go away. So you don't have to, you can do it as many times as you want. She also was able to provide me with some questions that previous interns had written down after their interviews. So I had a good idea of what questions would be asked. And then other than that, I just had a paper full of different experiences that I could call on no matter what the question was. And I kind of tried to line them out with the SMART style goals. So I was making sure they were specific, measurable, very results oriented, so that I had all of those little lines to call on and made sure that there was a complete story to fill up the 2 minutes of the HireVue questions.
I like how you specifically pointed out being able to speak to your skills or your experiences in a results oriented way. Because oftentimes when you're trying to tell your story, it's not only about what did you do, but also what was your impact. And those are the questions that you're trying to answer through your resume. But when your first interaction with an employer, Goldman Sachs or anyone else, is through this HireVue, being able to convey impact becomes very, very important. And I like how you said there too, again, practice, the most important thing. And it sounds like the Huntsman School provides a fantastic resource that a lot of schools don't provide yet, which is the ability to go in and do practice HireVues and watch yourself and critique yourself. And as awkward as it can feel, it really is so important to helping you achieve that kind of level of confidence and comfort when you're in that, kind of more high pressure situation. So Courtney, you talked a little about following the SMART model, writing down some stories. What are some themes? What are some themes that you prepared for? What different types of skills or attributes were you trying to pull out when you were putting together your list of stories that you wanted to have in your arsenal?
Yeah, so I wanted to highlight some of my analytical skills as an information systems major. I wanted to make sure that they were aware that I had some of those technical skills that I could bring to the table. And then I also wanted to highlight kind of my team working skills. When I was at the Huntsman School, I was on the business council, and then the previous year I was a business ambassador. So I had a bunch of team working skills that I was able to call upon to kind of use in the HireVue.
Smart. And I don't think those are attributes that are unique to Goldman Sachs, right? I think a lot of employers are going to be interested in what is your technical ability, what is your analytical ability, and also how do you work with other people. Kylan, same question. What are some different themes that you might have focused on in order to get ready for the HireVue stage?
Yeah, I would definitely say teamwork is the top one. Being able to demonstrate that you're somebody who others like to work with, because that's honestly the biggest thing, I think. And then the other thing I remember focusing on is being a critical thinker and problem solver. And having that adaptability and ability, the tenacity to be able to figure out what the problem is and how to get through it. Because I remember, just thinking about different stories that I had where it was a unique problem. I didn't know a solution. How am I going to get through this? And I think that just highlights my ability, to be adaptable on a team, because every day is a new challenge on my team, at least. So that's what I wanted to focus on.
Exactly. So teamwork, obviously, we've heard from both Kylan and Courtney. Teamwork is something that you're going to want to focus on and have some stories ready to share. Talked about, Kylan, you mentioned, tenacity and drive, so your ability to kind of persevere through challenging circumstances, problem solving when you don't necessarily have all of the information, or perhaps the information is constantly changing. Courtney mentioned analytical ability. I would say also other good stories to have in your arsenal would be stories around demonstrating that you have good judgment, right? Where you had to make a judgment call and then kind of what the overall impact was. Your ability to demonstrate integrity. Integrity will be really important. Again, not specific to Goldman Sachs, but definitely something that we look for. And another big one that we tend to see is intellectual curiosity, right? And so by intellectual curiosity, we mean your ability to dive deep into a subject. And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to a previous work or internship experience. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily related to a class. It could be something important to you in your personal life. I'm making it up, but maybe it's, you got very into Brazilian jiu-jitsu for XYZ reasons, and talking a little bit about how you've gone down that rabbit hole and the type of impact it's had on you and your body and your strength and your confidence, right? But all of it is, again, telling your story. If you think about your resume as phase one of you telling your story, at least for Goldman Sachs, the HireVue is going to be phase two. Now let's talk a little bit about logistics with the HireVue before we pivot to talking about our Super Day process, which is our final round in-person interview process. So with the way Goldman Sachs, the way we run our HireVue is you tend to see 5 kind of general firm-wide questions, and then you'll have 1 additional question for each division you've applied for. Now we allow people to apply for up to 3 different divisions and locations in combination, and so you will have anywhere from a total of 6 to 8 questions in total to respond to. And HireVue runs differently for different employers. With Goldman Sachs, once you launch your HireVue, you can't stop it. Meaning, if you don't quite like the way you answered a question, or you forgot to bring up a point that you meant to, unfortunately, you won't be able to stop it and re-record. Once you get going, it goes until it finishes. Logistically speaking, you will have 30 seconds to see the question up on the screen, and you have the option to have it read aloud to you. And then you will have 2 minutes to answer the question. And again, this is where Kylan and Courtney gave great examples, practicing, knowing what stories you're prepared to tell, and it kind of being comfortable with the points that you want to hit in that 2-minute period of time becomes extremely important. What I typically see is, if you're answering the question in maybe 45 seconds, maybe under a minute, you might not be hitting all parts of the question. So you want to make sure you're being thorough and answering all pieces. And also, this is your time to shine, right? And so if you have 2 minutes, you should use those 2 minutes, because we want to make sure that you're giving us enough context to share the story and demonstrate the skill that you're trying to demonstrate. And then the last thing is, Kyle and Courtney, did you guys see any technical questions on the HireVue?
If anything, if you call it technical, it's just market related, being aware of what's happening in the business market or financial markets was what I thought.
Yep. So you're right. So generally speaking, the questions on HireVue are going to be behavioral and situational. Again, fully designed to help us understand your story. I wouldn't even necessarily call the divisional questions that you will see technical. They're really just meant for us to understand, have you done your homework on this division that you've applied for? If it is a market-facing role, generally, do you understand the importance of the markets in this particular division, right? If it's not a market-facing role, it'll be another behavioral or situational type of question, again, designed to help us understand if you've done a little bit of research and you understand what you're applying for. Okay, So that wraps up the HireVue piece. Let's transition over to the Super Day experience. And Courtney, let's start with you. So can you talk a little bit about how you prepared for your Super Day and the types of questions that you saw during your Super Day?
Yeah. So to prepare for my Super Day, I did a lot of research on the operations division specifically, so that if they asked me, you know, what operations meant to me, why I wanted to be in the operations division, that I was prepared to answer that question. And that question did come up in all three of the interviews, why operations? I think a lot of people are curious to know what about operations interests you. So that came up a lot. Preparation-wise though, it was kind of the same for HireVue. I made sure I had all of my experiences ready to call upon if they asked any questions around those, and really just researched Goldman as a whole. So I had 3 interviews that were 30 minutes back to back. And in my first interview, we pretty much went through my resume, kind of like line by line, talking about the different experiences I've had, what was challenging within those experiences, what was really great in those experiences, if I like demonstrated leadership within those. So just a lot of like different kind of like typical interview questions just to show like how I work in a team and my different experiences. And then my second interview was a lot more conversational. I think it kind of varies on who's interviewing you, but I was getting interviewed by someone who was also super interested in data. So we ended up talking a lot about data analytics, business intelligence. I got talking about how I love taking data sets and being able to turn them into something that means something to people and they can make decisions based off of that. So my second interview was just, it was really great. I got to just like talk pretty much about everything that interests me. Yeah, so that was pretty much the gist of what my Super Day was like. It was a really good experience. The interviewers were super nice and friendly and really made me feel comfortable just like talking about my experiences and why I wanted to join Goldman.
That's great, Courtney. And I'm glad that that was your experience, that your interviewers were able to make you feel comfortable and really show who they really are. Because at the end of the day, Goldman Sachs, it's a big place. Yes, it's a place of business, but at the end of the day, Goldman Sachs is a relationship firm. And the person on the other side, or the people on the other side of the table or on the other side of the screen interviewing you, they're not making a decision about the conglomerate of knowledge that you should have by the time you graduate. They're making a decision about, is Courtney a person I want on the desk with me at the end of the day, right? Is Courtney a person I want to work with when things are kind of normal? And is Courtney the person I want to have on the desk with me when things might be a little intense or there's a really tough problem that we're trying to solve? And you know, anyone at the firm, I think, gets very excited about someone who is interested in data and can share that passion. I don't think you can escape data in any role that you're in at the firm. And so, Courtney, I'm glad you were able to connect with your interviewer in that way and share some of that passion as well. Now, Kylan, you interviewed in your Super Day for a role in one of our revenue generating divisions, right? The Consumer and Investment Management division. And I know your Super Day experience was slightly different from what others might have experienced. So can you talk a little bit about some of the questions that you were asked during your interview process?
Yeah, sure. So I had several interviews that day. I don't remember, it's like something like 4 or 6 or something like that, 30-minute interviews. One common theme that I definitely saw in all the interviews, I definitely got some sort of question about, like, here's a situation, how do you solve this problem, or some sort of teamwork related question, and trying to see how you react to a hard situation. So I got those type of questions a lot. In preparing, I prepared a lot for maybe some technical questions. I personally didn't receive too many of them, but some questions that I did receive did surprise me, and I was pretty proud of how I answered them. So maybe some advice for people, so like, for instance, if you put anything on your resume, be prepared for those things to be challenged. So, and be able to support that. So I remember, putting on my resume that I was proficient in Excel, and I was very comfortable Excel modeling, making some good claims on my resume. And one of my interviewers challenged that and said, okay, you're so good at Excel, like, what's your favorite formula and why? And tell me how this formula works, and and kind of stated some formulas. And I was able to back that up, and I was able to say, this is my favorite formula. And it's actually the index match formula, if you may know. And then he was like, all right, well, why is it better than VLOOKUP? Anyway, the point is that it challenged my resume and I was able to back it up. So if you would put anything on your resume, put it there, have a purpose behind it and have something to support it. And the last thing I'd say that really surprised me about the interviews that I was really happy about is that, again, they're looking for you to be a person. And so I remember them reading through my resume and I put on there that I had helped co-found the pickleball club at Utah State. And one of them asked, like, what's pickleball and why is this on your resume? Like, is that something that you're interested in? And it was just like, it turned the conversation totally casual. Whereas like, yeah, it is something I like to do, I'm passionate about. It was a good leadership opportunity for me at Utah State. And, it just made the whole interview more personable and more relatable. So that's kind of my experience.
Kylan, I'm glad you brought that up specifically because, again, I think there might be a stigma out there that, we're trying to make the environment as challenging and as uncomfortable for you as possible and that we want to be mean to you, and we absolutely do not. I'm glad you had pickleball on your resume, and I'm glad that it came up in your one-on-one, two-on-one interview, because I think this happens quite often. In like a skills and interests section on a resume, that's where connections are made, right? That's where we find a lot of common ground. And so by nature of being able to make that connection, not only was it kind of a conversation starter and an opener to create a little relief with respect to the amount of pressure that might have been in the room, but also it demonstrated who you are as a person, because you're more than what your potential career is going to be, right? We all are, and I think we would all agree with that. And so it really drives home this point that Goldman Sachs is made up of human beings, individuals, where we care a lot about what we do within the walls of the firm, but we also have lives outside of the firm that are very important to us. And making those connections on those things that are part of our lives outside of work are just as important. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I'm just conscious of the time really quickly. Kylan, could you give us one example of like a market-based question that you received during your super day? Can you remember one that you can just share with the group?
Yeah, I just remember a question that I got that it was something like, what's a news topic that you're following and why is it interesting to you? And, my interview was 2 years ago, so I don't remember the exact specifics, but I do remember being very interested in the M&A market and what was going on at that time and being able to share about a recent M&A transaction that happened and why I was following that. And, so if you're not prepared, it's very clear in that moment if you're not prepared. So it's good to be prepared for those kind of questions.
Yeah, exactly. And being prepared and practicing is important. I think there's always a lot going on, so there's things that you can pull from, but having that level of preparation definitely makes a difference. Okay, John, I understand we might have some questions waiting in the wings. And so if that's the case, I will turn over to you for a second to throw some questions at Courtney and Kylan.
Yes, thank you so much, Richelle. So I'll start with Kylan first and then Courtney, if you want to add on to this. Both of you talked about things that you did during your undergrad to add value or experience that you put on your resume, like pickleball or business council. What are some areas that you think students should really focus on to add value while there are students that you think were of relevance, whether directly or indirectly, to your interview experience?
Yeah. I would first of all say it doesn't matter what you're interested in or what you do, just do something. Like that is just the biggest thing because it shows that you're passionate and it helps you just have drive for something. And that's really good. So for me, it was the pickleball club, the finance and economics club. And then I was also involved in the Huntsman scholar program pretty heavily. So, for me, those provided opportunities for leadership, provided opportunities for mentorship, and then making lasting friendships. And that all those skills translate directly to the work environment. You need leadership and teamwork ability, and developing relationships is so key.
Yeah, I actually visited Goldman, I think my sophomore year of school, and one of the recruiters kind of gave an overview of what they're looking for on resumes and what's stands out to them. And I remember he said that they're not looking for job experience at a bank or a hedge fund or something. They don't expect, sophomores in college to have that experience. And so at the time I was a server in college. And so I put my server experience, and I think it's important to just have some job experience and just know that they're not if you don't have this professional work experience, you won't get the job, but just make sure you do have some work experience, whether it's clubs or being an ambassador or just, you know, being a server at a restaurant. Like, I think it's really important to show that you have like a good work ethic. Yeah, so I think that's really important.
I think the overarching theme between what Courtney and Kylan said is that we are looking for well-rounded students, and well-rounded means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It could be pickleball, it could be your part-time or full-time job, no matter what it is. If it was like Courtney, who worked as a server, I scooped ice cream when I was in college, but that teaches you things, right? That teaches you skills, that gets you in front of people, that helps you build your network. It makes you responsible and accountable, right? Student organizations, sports, anything that you're involved in belongs on your resume. And again, we're really looking for that well-rounded student, because yes, you should be strong academically, but if you're only doing academics, of course you should be strong academically, right? But that's not real life. We want to see that you're able to balance competing demands and also invest yourself in things that you care a lot about. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Richelle, this one's actually for you.
Oh.
Where you're on the other end of it and you're interviewing with these students and these potential hires. What are some common pitfalls or mistakes? And let's try to get past the obvious, like huge typos in a resume, or they're not dressed up for the interview, they're just in their bed. Just some really common, maybe a little bit higher level things that really don't do well in an interview setting.
Yes. So it becomes obvious when someone is trying to pretend to be something that they're not, meaning they're trying to pretend to be what they think I want, but it's not genuine, right? Or it could even be just an outright lie, right? Obviously, and anyone will tell you this, obviously, you know, lying is not something we recommend in any kind of interview professional setting, right? That goes back to integrity, which is something that we look for. But I think that's the biggest pitfall. And I know nerves come into play, but we legitimately are trying to get to know you for who you are and understand your skills and your interests. And so when you come to an interview, we want you to represent you. We want you to feel like you can bring your whole self to that interview, and not try to pretend to be what you think we might want. The most important thing is to be authentic and genuine in who you are. And I think, you know, going through some of these practice exercises that Courtney and Kylan discussed will also help with some of that confidence as well. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, if you're nervous, we're going to deem you for it. Everyone gets nervous. I think even in some cases, our interviewers get nervous, right? Like they want to make sure that they're having, that, you know, they're having, you know, the right types of conversations, and they're making hiring decisions that are going to impact their teams for years to come, probably. And so I think that's probably the most important advice that I could get, is being really authentic and genuine about who you are. And don't worry about who you think we want you to be. We want you to be you.
Really appreciate it, Richelle. Thank you so much. Our last question I'm going to direct, we'll do the same order we did with our young alum. We'll start with Kylan and then have Courtney touch on it. And it's just outside of even specifically Goldman, but in general, any tips or advice for when you're being interviewed in a panel or hiring committee type scenario, where you're one person and you've got 4 or 5 individuals, either virtually or in person, just looking down and asking questions? Any tips or advice in that scenario?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the super day scenario, right? I had 2 or 3 people every time. So yeah, it's just finding ways to be personable. You know, you got to find some connection point. You know, we've all probably had interviews where it's just, you know, you're just answering questions and then there's no side discussion, or there's no, you know, it almost feels like it's just kind of cut and dry, and you're talking to a wall sometimes. You want to try and find ways to cut through that. You want to try and find connection points. So that's, again, like Richelle pointed out, with your skills and interests, you know, have something that maybe they'll talk to you about, or you can talk to them about. And then the other thing I would say, that a hugely important thing is you should come prepared with questions, because that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate your ability, your research, and your curiosity in them. And if it feels like that, the conversation's hard or it feels awkward, you know, that's a good breakthrough point too, to ask them questions. Let them start talking to you, and then you can figure out how you can connect with them better.
You stole my answer. I feel like having questions prepared is like the biggest thing you can do in an interview. Something that I do when I'm I'm interviewing, usually the interviewers will give a quick description of themselves, like how long they've been at the firm, you know, what their job is. And so a lot of the times I'll try and shape my questions to be specific to something they've told me about themselves or their team or what they're doing day to day. I think that makes the questions a bit more conversational and authentic versus, you know, like the standard, why do you want to work here? Like what's your day-to-day look like? I think if you can kind of say like, oh, you've been here for 9 years, how, like, why have you stayed so long here? You know, so that they know that you were paying attention to their initial introductions and stuff. I think that's really important.
Perfect. Really appreciate it. Thank you both so much. And thank you, Richelle, as well, for jumping on and help facilitate this conversation. Thank you all again for everyone watching live, for participating. Really appreciate it. Before we wrap, I'm going to turn it over to Richelle. Richelle, if you'd like to just really fast update on dates and deadlines for applying for Goldman.
Sure. So if you haven't applied already, we encourage you to do so as soon as possible. So if you graduate in December of this year or spring of 21, you are eligible to apply for 2021 new analyst roles. And you apply through our website, gs.com/careers. Do make sure that you know, when you're applying, that you are selecting the year 2021. If it defaults to 2020, you will only be able to apply for roles. I think the drop down right now says Tel Aviv, but we're done for 2020 hiring. So don't do that. Make sure you change it to 2021. And then if you graduate in December of 21 or spring of 22, you're eligible to apply for 2021 summer analyst roles. So that is our internship program. And if you haven't already applied, like I said, I encourage you to do that. We also host lots of different types of programming throughout the spring for our freshmen and sophomores. And so if you graduate after that spring 22 deadline, we still have a lot of ways that you can engage with the firm, and more information will be coming on that in the coming weeks. So, you know, if you have any questions about the process, I always tell John, please feel free to share my email address. We will help you. We will help you navigate it. But I would encourage you to apply sooner rather than later. And on whether you're applying for a new analyst role or a summer analyst role, you can apply for up to 3 different division location combinations. We would love for you to come and join us in our Salt Lake City office. We are the 2nd largest in the Americas and the 4th largest globally, and we're continuing to grow. But our Dallas office is growing quite a bit as well. And we're still trying to fill seats for 2021 opportunities in Dallas as well as Salt Lake.
Thank you so much. To echo what Richelle said, if you have any other questions that we weren't able to answer, or if you'd just like to connect with either Richelle, Kylan, or Courtney, I'm sure they'd be more than willing. Look them up on LinkedIn or reach out to me directly and I can help share their contact information. Thank you all so much for joining us here today at Backpack for Briefcase, and have a great rest of your Friday.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.